Wow. Yeah.
We do have enough to say. And then,
Good morning. We live in a country where everyone should feel welcome and supported. But sadly, that's not the case. We live in a country where freedom is enjoyed by some, but not others. The freedom to choose is no longer a fundamental right when it comes to reproductive health care. And now health care for trans kids is under endangering lives. Instead of leaving health care decisions to parents and their doctors, legislators in Jefferson City and across the United States are putting laws in place that put at risk the lives of children and teens. I support the work of Washington University and the standards set by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Trans parents and their families have my support, and they deserve the support of our community as well. Across the country, we're seeing a troubling trend to pass laws that marginalize communities that have historically struggled to gain rights. Attacks on the LGBT community are happening with increasing frequency in school districts, in state houses, and in Congress. A Don't Say Gay bill is under consideration in Missouri, similar to the one that passed in Florida. And a book ban is almost certain in Missouri, focusing on books written by minorities or featuring minorities. And we're seeing more attacks on transgender people, both physically and restricting access to health care. And this extreme activity has no place in our country and certainly has no place in St. Louis County. As a government responsible for representing everyone with a priority on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to make sure that we are providing seats at the decision-making table for everyone. And that's why I'm establishing an LGBTQ task force. And the task force will advise my administration on areas of concern to ensure that county agencies are fairly and equitably addressing the LGBTQ community. And this includes access and inclusion to all aspects of life. I'll work with organizations such as PROMO, a statewide advocacy group, to help identify those to be part of this task force. This is a moment not to be squandered. We'll meet each challenge as an opportunity to push back against discrimination and ignorance. When the appetite is this great to hate, we cannot stand by and be silent. So this morning, I'll be citing a proclamation establishing the LGBTQ task force, but before I do so, I'd like to recognize Katie Erker Lynch, the Executive Director of PROMO Missouri, to make a few remarks. Katie?
Good morning. I'm Katie Erker Lynch, and I serve as the Executive Director at PROMO, Missouri's statewide LGBTQ+ advocacy and policy organization. PROMO was founded over 36 years ago. Over the past several decades, our organization has traditionally spent the first half of the year in Jefferson City dedicated to advancing LGBTQ+ equality, and the remainder of the year offering opportunities for community education, leadership development, and LGBTQ+ empowerment in rural and urban communities alike. The past 5 or 6 years have felt vastly different. Instead of moving progress forward, we've been on the defensive, spending over 90% of our efforts defending the rights of some of the most vulnerable people in the LGBTQ+ community, transgender youth, transgender adults, and especially trans women and femmes of color. In the 2023 legislative session, Missouri legislators have now filed 31 explicitly anti-LGBTQ+ bills. These bills have been rammed through committees, even though in public testimony, opposition to these bills has consistently outnumbered those in favor of these bills. Official Senate committee minutes show the opposition to such bills is overwhelming. For gender-affirming healthcare bans, 70% of testifiers were opposed. For bills that limit the ability to modify birth certificates, 97% of Missourians who testified opposed the bill. For bills that prohibit trans youth from playing sports with their friends, 63.5% of testifiers opposed those bills. Yet every single one of those bills that limits the freedoms of LGBTQ+ Missourians has swiftly passed out of committee and been placed on the Senate calendar. The rhetoric and the fact that our ability to exist as queer and trans people is being debated does tremendous harm, with increases in bullying and harassment and decreases in mental health and the wellness of the community. LGBTQ+ people, and young people in particular, are not inherently prone to depression, anxiety, or suicidality because of their sexual orientation or gender identity, but rather youth are placed at a higher risk because of how they are mistreated and stigmatized in society. Our partners at the Trevor Project recently released the 2022 National Survey on LGBTQ+ mental health for youth. The data on Missouri is striking and a clear call to action. 86% of trans youth say that this type of legislation being debated has negatively impacted their mental health. 55% very negatively. And 48% of transgender and non-binary youth here in Missouri said that these bills specifically made them feel, quote, hopeless. It's clear the county has heard this data and is acting. And I want to thank County Executive Dr. Sam Page and council members for your leadership in standing up for LGBTQ+ youth and teens in St. Louis County. Today, St. Louis County joins St. Louis City and Kansas City as major metropolitan areas that have established commissions which share in PROMO's vision that Missouri is a state in which LGBTQ+ people, every demographic, every race, every zip code, and lived experience are valued and thriving. The county's efforts toward solidarity started with one key action: listening. Unlike certain senators in Jefferson City, council members have talked with their constituents. They listened to LGBTQ+ constituents' concerns and to the parents of transgender and gender-diverse youth. Youth who need access to evidence-based, life-saving care at our local hospitals. We thank you for listening and for acting after hearing their stories. For this reason, among others, we commend St. Louis County for taking these important steps, passing the resolution yesterday, and forming the task force today. My hope is that other leaders across the state see this as a call to action, and that young, queer, and trans people see this as hope for the future. PROMO calls upon other elected officials, faith, business, civic, and private sector leaders to stand with us in calling out this outrageous slate of hate, aiming to silence and deny the existence, the very right to live, of LGBTQ plus Missourians. Thank you to the county for your leadership.
Okay, I'd be glad to answer any questions. Hi.
Katie, could I?
Katie.
Sure. Sure.
Could you please spell your name and give us your pronouns?
Sure. My first name is Katie, Katy. My last name is Erker Lynch, ERKER-LYNCH, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns.
So obviously, a lot of the issues that are happening in Missouri are happening at the state level. What can the county, in your view, actually do to help support the LGBTQ community? Is it just stand in solidarity, or are there practical measures that the county can take?
I think that's a great question, and the work of the task force will help us to see what it is the county has in their power to do. I'll say that as a young queer person who grew up in St. Louis County, I left at 18 years old because I didn't see a future for myself here. And I was here in St. Louis County. And so actions like today, which might feel symbolic in a proclamation, actually are incredibly meaningful for young people who know you're safe, we see you, we hear you, and there are people in powerful positions fighting for you. In terms of what the county can actually do, I think that will depend on which bills actually pass, which amendments are included, and the ramifications for physicians who are seeking to provide care, as well as for parents who are trying to provide access to evidence-based best practice care for their kids. We've worked with counties across the state to be able to provide non-discrimination protections that the state does not offer. And the county has been a leader for contracts and workers here in the county as well. So there's always creative approaches that we can take to make sure that we can create spaces that are safe and affirming and inclusive. And it really will depend on the legislation that we see.
Same question to you, county executive. In your view, what can the county do to support, practically speaking, in addition to symbolic solidarity?
I think this statement of support is important because this is what you see here, the top levels of government in St. Louis County, the executive branch, the legislative branch, saying that we stand with the trans community and we stand with their families and these kids. I think that's a very important statement. There are some laws that are subject to local control, some are state control and some are federal. We'll be watching those closely and we'll work with the members of our task force to identify ways that we can do more than state our strong support.
Is this about medicine or politics?
Well, legislation has a political flavor, and this is a law that affects people's ability to get health care. And we're here to say that these laws are bad ideas. And we're here to say that people need to get access to health care. This is life-saving health care.
I guess my question is, what types of people do you hope to see on this task force, and what types of recommendations around the medical space do you hope to hear from them, if any?
Well, we don't know what we don't know, so we're going to get a group together who are affected, a group that represents the community that's under attack, and listen to them. And we'll listen to their ideas and we'll implement what we can. There's the laws regulating the practice of medicine are generally state laws, some of them federal, but we're going to watch those closely and we'll step in wherever we can.
The state has at times taken an interest in age limits on things as mundane as tattoos to drinking alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see a government interest in setting age limits on some permanent procedures, or how do you weigh that issue?
Well, I think that we'll look and see what the state recommends, but generally this is a decision between parents and doctors about kids' health care to save their lives. And this is much different than tattoos or other things that affect kids. But we're talking about life-saving interventions for kids based on the judgment of their parents and doctors, and that's where the conversation needs to be, and that's the statement we're making today.
How many members will be you appoint all of them?
Yeah, this is a task force that reports to me, but certainly I'll be interested in the advice of other people in the community. But we'll start with Promo, the lead advocacy group for these affected kids in our community, and we're going to start with them.
Dr. Page, we've called, we've emailed, we've tried to ask about the summer camp drowning and what's being done to ensure that kids going to summer camps are going to be safe.
Well, summer camps in St. Louis County are run under the procedures of the county and to some extent under state regulations, depending on which ones are exempt. But we're going to do everything in our power to make sure the kids that are participating in our camps are safe. We're all aware of the drowning, which was an extraordinary tragedy. There's an investigation ongoing, and we're going to learn from it and apply whatever lessons we learn in the future.
Will there be things like swim tests being done for kids going into these camps?
I think we'll wait until this investigation is done. We'll follow all of the best practices and recommendations that our Parks Department comes up with and that the state advises us to follow. I'm not aware of anything that's going to change moving forward, but we'll learn. We'll learn from the investigation, and we'll apply what we learn moving forward.
County Council also asking for $5 million to renovate the building. Do you think that's a good plan, or is there another thing that you favor?
Well, this building needs to either go or be retrofitted for sprinklers, and that is a law that's in place, and it needs to be done by 2028. 2028 is 5 years away, and it takes a long time to make these changes. The renovations that we need will be at least $50 million, probably a lot more. And anytime we're talking about spending that amount of money, we need to plan thoughtfully for it. And a study to make this decision about whether to rehab this building or renovate this building or take it down is a complex question that requires a lot of expert advice. And an investment of several $1 million in that question is pretty normal.
On a different note, there's been a lot of interest in something that happened in the city this weekend, this tragedy around a girl who lost her legs. To the extent that the idea or perception of danger or crime in St. Louis City affects the broader county, what was your reaction to the way that was handled at the prosecutor's office? Do you have any feedback or input you'd like to see happen?
Oh, I don't have any feedback on the crime in the city, the prosecutions of that crime. Crime is a regional issue. We're happy that crime in St. Louis County is headed in the right direction. I understand crime in the city of St. Louis violent crime is going down as well. Anytime there's a tragedy like that, we feel badly and we learn from it, and we try to take those lessons and apply them moving forward. I haven't studied that case. I haven't heard a report about that case. I don't have any recommendations, but I know that St. Louis County is very involved in violent crime. We're very involved in trying to address property crimes, and the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council is meeting tomorrow to discuss a lot of these issues.
You've been meeting privately with county council members and members of your administration to discuss the budget impasse. How have those meetings been going? What have you been talking about?
Well, these are generally educational meetings. These are the question is about meetings with our budget director and some council members and some of my staff. And this is generally a deep dive into the budget book to understand the detail on how the budget is put together, where the money comes from, how the decisions are made about new revenues, what new revenues could be possible. But this is generally a learning exercise, and when they're prepared to discuss the process of decisions, then that'll be done in public.
Should the county curtail or compartmentalize public comment?
The question is about public comments at the county council meetings. I think it is unusual for the county council to, for a legislative body to have this extent of comments and to have this extent of comments that don't have much to do with the business in front of the council. That's been going on now for a couple of years. And I think it's prudent for the council to find a way to get their handle around it so they can conduct business and hear from the community in ways that help them make decisions and isn't simply a ventilation exercise for people that are frustrated about a lot of things and sometimes are coming here for just to talk.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks a lot. Very much.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I'll put it up there too, buddy.
Flag as well, and some things that are some wonderful, and people that you can support as well. Great. Of course. Of course, thank you.
Also, they just to see those courses.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Here's my card.
Thanks very much.
These things we have on the school. Have you talked to her?
We have, yeah, do you know Robert? I talked to her.
No, no, no.
Yeah, we spoke with Tony yesterday.
Okay, okay, so she's in touch.